You can't be too scared to lose yourself that you don't even allow the experience of finding yourself to even happen. I think a lot of times what happens is we get so caught up in awareness, in self observance, and in self analysis that we don't even realize that all of the work that we're doing is sort of internal dialogue work where we're talking to ourselves rather than actually having a conversation with the cause and effect of reality. For the most part, what we need to do is actually let go of all these imaginary rules that we've created in our minds. Because a lot of times we forget that those rules that we create in our mind, though we think they're so prominent, though we think that we are so defined by the character traits we've learned through all these years, there's no inherent law in reality or in the universe that states you need to abide by the beliefs you have about yourself. So a lot of times we'll limit ourselves, especially when we start getting into things such as psychology, philosophy, and really pondering our life path and what we want our lives to be. We start to put limitations and rules on the type of person now we need to be. So even when we're transitioning from sort of one state of being to another, even then we'll sometimes only allow the transition to happen within a certain set of rules and limitations. So, for example, a person who has been meditating for a while, has been practicing a lot of healing, inner child work, shadow work, all the things like that, but they've been spending a lot of time in isolation, and now they want to do something maybe more practical. They want to start a business or start posting on social media. Any of the things, they want to embrace more of the practical sort of mindset of life. And what will happen is they won't really allow themselves the full experience of who they were before and the flowers that they planted from their past self to bloom into their new self. So they'll completely abandon the type of person that they were before in exchange for the person that they are now. But you need a balance of both. So in this new mindset of said person, maybe they still don't go out as much, they still don't hang out with people, they still aren't getting that sort of social interaction, and that's kind of the exact thing they needed. So in the past, when they were doing all that sort of inner child work and healing work, maybe they were around a lot of people, and that's why they needed those practices. And now, for some reason, they believe that to advance to the next level, they can't also exist in a set of social paradigms and have socialization and have friends and contact with family and all this different sort of stuff. This is the sort of dangerous rabbit hole that people fall into when they start to believe that the archetype of who they are now are real limitations instead of just imaginary imposed limitations. And actually, when we challenge ourselves to expand beyond a singular definition of who we are, things start to come together in all areas of our life. So you release a song or you release a painting or whatever it is. You spend the whole week focusing on who's seeing it, who's watching it, what are people saying about it. And then you decide, okay, I'm going to go out and hang out with my friends, listen to some live music. And in that moment, maybe you start getting feedback. You start getting those likes that you've been wanting. It's interesting how reality works like that, that when we let go of it, we can finally have it. As you're listening to live music, as you're listening to the band sort of string their guitars and you're with your friends and you're laughing, you're having a great time, what you did during the week is now starting to pay off almost as a result of you finally letting go from it. You put a lot of energy, you put a lot of your hard work into it, and then at the end, you sort of release. You're creating a sort of build and detachment practice that is both needed. And this works for all things as well. This works for friendships, relationships, or anything like that. You put in the required effort, and then you realize that's all you can do. Now you have to let go. Now you have to let go, and that's the most simple way to put it. If you're constantly trying to force things into singular definitions, if you're constantly trying to force things into only being a particular way, you're going to just keep getting more and more resistance because it's fine the first time. It's fine during the week. It's fine whatever the case may be. It's fine to put that effort in. But when it's only effort and no release and no detachment and no trust, you start to almost become burdened by your own ambition, by your own motivation, by your own inspiration. And this may even be what people call burnout. And I think burnout and sort of losing yourself kind of falls into similar contexts, because what we're finding is in those acts, in this new archetype of person that we are, we've abandoned the fruits of the labor of our old self. We need to bring the positive qualities of our old self into this new growth, into this sort of rebirth of who we are now. And I find in my life, whenever I challenge myself to not exist under one paradigm, not sort of be one dimensional, that sort of the other surrounding aspects of my life start to come together. If all you're doing is letting go, if all you're doing is detaching, then things might become stagnant. If all you're doing is putting in effort, if all you're doing is putting in the work through motivation and inspiration from whatever you want in life, then you may be burnt out, then you might lose yourself. So we need both. We need both. We need to understand that in everything, there is the very real possibility and the very real truth that everything is temporary, and also the very real possibility that things may go on for a while. Somewhere between it can all end tomorrow and it can end in 80 to 100 years. Obviously these are crazy very random numbers, but we need to have a balance between that. If you go too much, it can all end tomorrow. If you go too much in that direction, then you're going to kind of screw with your future self. You're not really going to lay down the proper foundations for them to thrive if all you're really concerned about is how can I make the most of right now? And of course, we know all we have is the present. But if we only treat the present, this present, as the only reality, practically, we can actually end up worse off, because though we're surrendering to presence, we're also surrendering our ability to find deeper presence in the future. We need to lay down a sort of practice where we're making growth for the future, and at the same time, we're understanding that the future is not promised. I think that's where a lot of misery also comes in. When we work really hard for something and all of our bets are sort of pushed into the future, we're sort of going all in on the future. There always kind of is this cloud that's looming that's saying the future is not promised. And I think this can sort of cause a bit of misery, because now going out of your way, going out of your comfort zone, whatever it may be, seeing your friends on the weekend, whatever it may be. Now there's this voice kind of coming in where, no, we need to get everything done now. If we don't put in enough effort now, then the future's not going to be how we want it to be. And that's just simply not true, because then you could play the other role and say, well, the future's not promised. I don't want to live my life with regret. What if it all ends tomorrow? What if it all ends in a week? What if it all ends in a month? Probably not, but there's no certainty that tomorrow will be there. So I have to make the most of today while also not subjugating myself to only concerning my being with the present. Somewhere between, it can all end tomorrow and it can last another 100 years. Somewhere between there, we need to hear both sides. We need to hear both point of views to find balance, because we can lose ourselves in either. Someone can spend their whole lives planning for the future, their whole lives building for the future, and they never get there. Or they live their lives with regret because they kept looking to the next moment, to the next weekend, to the next day, to the next hour, whatever it is. They're always looking to the next thing. And a couple next things later, it's all gone. All the next things have passed now, and they never fully enjoyed what was right in front of them. And in the same remark, someone can only concern themselves with, how do I have fun now? How do I enjoy myself now? And then in 10 years' time, they're kind of in the exact same spot practically. And that can feel misery as well. So I think a balance of both perspectives, not being afraid to lose ourselves so we can find ourselves, and also not spending all of our time finding ourselves. Because you will find yourself in the most peculiar and random things. Like I said before, you could find yourself in a concert. You could find yourself in the toughest moment of your life. You could find yourself in the happiest moment of your life. You could find yourself in all the very different aspects that life encompasses. And if you know truly that you're keeping a balance of both tomorrow is not promised and the future can be everything I want it to be, you give yourself a sort of spiritual justice. Whereas if you were to go in one direction, there would always be that voice that is somewhat reasonable because both of those voices are reasonable. Both the voice of tomorrow's not promised and the other voice of it can last another 100 years, both of those voices are reasonable. So the mistake people make is they choose one. You can't choose one. You can't choose one. You have to ride along the middle path. You have to be willing to let go, to have fun, to be childlike. And then you also need to be willing to set the groundwork, be there for yourself, be there for your future self, be there for others, inconvenience yourself. There needs to be a distinguish of both. And in participating in both fully, in fully letting go and in fully embracing, we can find the better qualities of both. And we see they actually match each other very well. And we start to find a satisfaction in our own lives, not constantly pulling on the satisfaction of this thing needs to be enjoyable right now or this thing needs to be enjoyable in 10 years.